Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Meet Your Makers. Today we're going to spend some time talking about assisted hatching and all the different ways that we use it in the lab. Whether or not you're aware of it or not, it's used quite often and not something that's generally spoken about, but something that I want everyone to understand because I think it scares a lot of people. In fact, I know it scares a lot of people and I think it's dangerous, so I would rather try to show you some really great examples and hopefully this helps shine some light on the issue. So, the first kind of assisted hatching that we like to call collapsing on a blastocyst that we are about to freeze or vitrify. I did take a video of it, of an embryo that I collapsed right before freezing. So, the whole point of collapsing an embryo before you want to freeze it is because the inside of the blastocele, so here and here, is composed mainly of water. So, when we freeze this embryo, and if we don't collapse it, this is a very controversial issue. I know throughout the years that people have gone back and forth about whether or not they should collapse or not. They don't think that it causes harm to the embryo. However, does it cause harm if we don't collapse? So, like I said, here and here is filled with water. Think of it like a balloon, and remember these embryos are 3D. Obviously we can't see them as 3D on the screen. So what we want to do is we want to find a junction in between two cells, hit it once with a laser that's built into this microscopic, and allow that water to come out and allow the embryo to collapse so that we can freeze it with the water outside of it. The whole concept, obviously it doesn't get all of the water out, it gets most of the water out. So the whole concept behind this is that when we freeze this embryo and we thaw it, there will not be ice crystals inside that blastocele, causing damage or death to the cells. So, this is a video of a blastocyst, like I said, that I am collapsing for freeze. So here's my laser right here. I'm gonna hit it once. I'm focusing right now on the edge. I'm gonna hit in between the cells once, and you are gonna see this embryo start to slowly shrink. So, it's already collapsing. So this is done mostly on all embryos that prior to freezing, unless a patient specifically says they don't want assisted hatching, also known as collapsing. However, as you can see, it doesn't harm the embryo. When we thaw this embryo, it's going to blow back up like a balloon. In fact, I have a video of an embryo we just thawed and we do the assisted hatching on, and then afterwards it re-expands and looks just like this, only better. Again, it's not going to kill your embryo, we're not doing anything barbaric, just kind of wanted you guys to get a feel of how we do this. So, remember, this is the shell, here's the embryo, hatching out of the shell, so it does look like two embryos, but really it's just one. The ICM is over here, the rest of these cells, the trophectoderm. Let's move on to the next one, which is going to be our day 3 hatching. So, as you can see, here are the blastomeres, also known as the cells. So we give you on day 3, if you get a day 3 report from your doctor, you get, let's pause it for a second. So you get a cell number and a grade for each embryo on day 3. Lots of doctors have stopped doing this because they feel that day 3 information is really not important unless it's a 1 cell, 2 cell, 3 cell embryo. Anything 6 cells and up, and honestly I've even seen 5 cells catch up. They don't feel that information is very valuable. I've seen ugly grade 3, the worst grade embryos make beautiful blastocysts. Again, that's not always, but it is sometimes. I've seen beautiful, no fragmentation, not so symmetrical, but this embryo right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, has about 6 cells that I could see just from looking at this. I do have to play with the focus in order to see the cells on the top and the bottom of the embryo. But again, this is already over 6 cells. It has virtually no fragmentation, and the cells are not symmetrical, so I wouldn't give this a grade 1. I would probably give this a 1.5 or 2, depending on what grading scale your lab uses. So, like I said, lots of labs now, either on day 3 or day 4, if that patient is going to be doing PGT testing, which is the genetic testing, we do have to hatch, whether it be on day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, it has to get done, it's not optional. Embryos do hatch on their own. But in order for us to take cells out and send them for testing, if they're not hatched, we have to make a hatch and go and pull those cells out, which we don't like to do here at AFS. I didn't do it at my last job. I don't do it at a lot of the other jobs I work at. I find just in my experience, along with the people, my mentors, when you hatch on day 3 or day 4, it allows that embryo, just like we saw in the previous post, to start hatching out of its shell. And then we only need to take around 4 to 5 cells for testing. So what we do is we just pull off cells off the blast, cut it with a laser, take those cells into a separate drop, let that embryo collapse, and then we freeze it, and then we take those cells, put them in a very tiny tube, and send them off for testing. We freeze the embryo and keep it on site. So this is kind of a precursor to that. Or if somebody's having a day 3 transfer, sometimes we hatch anyway, just to up your chances of pregnancy. Again, we don't do that if a patient requests they don't want it. However, it is not going to cause any harm to your embryo. As you can see, we pick the area with the biggest gap. So you want to be far away from the cells so that you don't risk damaging anything. Because again, if I hit the cells with that laser, it will kill a cell. So you always pick a spot that is the furthest away from cells. So as you can see, it's making a clear cut in the zona, the shell of the embryo. Right here, you could see that hole is pretty clear. So again, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, PGT. This needs to be done in order for us to biopsy that embryo for you. Again, this is another day 3 embryo, not as nice as the previous one. As you can see, a bit of fragmentation. I picked this area over here to do my hatch on. Again, it does have over 6 cells. I would give this a grade 2, not a grade 1. The cells are not symmetrical, there's fragmentation. However, this actual embryo did make a blast that we were able to biopsy and came back euploid. So again, day 3 information, not very valuable, not very informative. We just want really the only cursor that we can use, the only markers that we can use for checking day 3 is making sure that it's got a good cell number and the amount of fragmentation. Obviously, if the cell is riddled in fragmentation, you can't even count the cells. Those embryos, a lot less likely to make a blastocyst, under 10%. I have seen fragmented embryos that are around 10 to 20% of the embryo make a blast, but anything over 20%, usually garbage. Okay, so this is an FET that we had done. This is the collapsed embryo. You can actually see the ICM here. Trophectoderm. You can start to see the cavity already forming. The embryo is already hatching because this was probably a biopsied embryo. So as you can see, they start off very, 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 very small. And then after most labs, I want to say, wait about 2 hours prior to the FET at least to thaw the embryo. So you thaw 2 hours ahead of time. By the time 2 hours hits for an FET, you've got a beautiful embryo that's already re-expanded. The only time that you'll go for transfer and you'll see something like this is if they thawed right before your transfer and didn't give it any time to expand, which some labs do. They don't like to wait. Or the embryo didn't survive a thaw. So this one looks a little dark. It's not dead, but when an embryo is dead and shriveled up like this, completely black. Usually an embryologist can tell right away at thawing time that the embryo didn't survive. We still give it some time to recover, but that re-expansion is something that you want to look for. Since this embryo is already hatching, it doesn't need to be assisted hatched. But again, another controversial issue. The freeze and the thaw process, did it reseal that hole and cause it not to allow any media inside? Some embryologists thinks it does. My old job, whether or not it was biopsied or not, whether or not it was hatching or not, we still made a second hole to allow that media into the shell to help the embryo re-expand. So some embryologists will make a small incision here, kind of aid the embryo into getting that diluting solution into that warming solution into the embryo. Some problems we do see with this is double hatching. I'll go to do the transfer after it's completely re-expanded and it'll be hatching from 2 different holes. Usually it ends up pulling out of 1 hole anyway, but you see it starting to hatch out of 2 holes. This is another reason why it's a controversial issue. Some people think that it has the ability to pull that embryo apart as it's hatching if it's in 2 different spots and then create monozygotic twins. Again, very rare occurrence, but again, controversial issue. So that's pretty much it for assisted hatching. If I want to show you an example of what an embryo looks like before it's thawed. So here's an embryo collapsed. This was right after we thawed it from the straw. So as you can see, the cavity has already appeared. There's still a big gap in between the embryo and the shell. This is still collapsed. But here's our ICM right here. and it's a really nice looking embryo. This was at, let's say, 2.5 hours before transfer. So by the time those 2 hours were up, as you can see, the cavity is completely filled and the hatched out part of the embryo has already re-expanded. So just try to keep that in mind when you're worrying about assisted hatching and the damage it does on the embryo. As you can see, the embryo is beautiful. This embryo actually did implant and cause a healthy baby. It did result in a healthy baby. Just wanted to explain why they look so different and the reasons behind why we do assisted hatching. So many people get so scared about practices that they used to use back in the day. Acid-based hatching, or something called drilling, where we use something like an injection needle to manually make a hole in the embryo. Those practices were very dangerous and did not have a good survival rate and caused a lot of damage to embryos. Nobody does that anymore. Everybody uses a laser. There's a ton of different kinds of lasers you can buy from a microscope now, FDA approved and totally safe for somebody who's trained and knows what they're doing on the laser. I've never killed an embryo or damaged it using a laser. That's not something that anybody should have to worry about unless you hear the words drilling or acid-based. Then you should ask why they're not up to date using a laser, or like maybe they're more comfortable using that method. They're an older embryologist, that's all they know how to do. They're very experienced in it, and even then, it's safe because that person knows what they're doing and they have a lot of experience behind it. So much of embryology comes from the embryologist. It is so important to walk into a clinic and start your cycle there knowing that you're working with an embryologist that has experience and has been properly trained. I cannot emphasize that enough. When you go to a big lab like RMA, New Hope, any of those huge labs who have over 10 embryologists, you do not need to worry about that. If you are going to a small lab that has a small lab of under 10 people, you want to know that your embryologist knows what they're doing, and you shouldn't have to feel bad about asking that. Asking your doctor, hey, how much experience does your embryologist have? Can I check on that? Can I go onto LinkedIn and see where they worked previously? If they don't have a LinkedIn, can you tell me where they've worked and how many years experience they have? It's so important because there's just such a high demand for senior embryologists right now, and there's such a shortage of embryologists that I do a lot of per diem, and I know that other labs are short-staffed, and like, you want to know who's working on your embryos, and you want to know their stats. What's your FERT? What's your blast rate? What's your pregnancy rate for my age group? These things are so important. These are things that you need to be asking your tribe. You want to make sure that where you're going is giving you the best possible outcome. And there are so many things that go into it. It's not just the embryologist. Yes, the embryologist is so important, but the equipment, the media, co-culturing, do you guys change plates on day 3? What kind of media are you using? Is it 1-step? Is it 2-step? These are things you want to ask. These are things that you're going to want to know about. You're not going to want to have to guess and then wait for that final phone call where they tell you that you have nothing left. You want answers. Your embryologist should be able to tell you, how is your sperm quality? How is your egg quality at time of ICSI? These things are important. If there was really bad sperm source and the eggs were okay, a lot of embryologists like to say that from day 0 to day 3 it has a lot to do with egg quality, and from day 3 to day 6 has a lot to do with sperm quality. So if you have bad sperm and you have no blastocysts turned out, there's a reason for that. If you have bad egg quality, I mean, this is something that you want to know. There's so many things that embryologists can note during the time of ICSI that they should be sharing with you so that you can try and improve your cycle. So don't be afraid to ask. That's really just my take-home message from this assisted hatching video. I have so many people reach out to me telling me that they don't know anything and they're in the dark. Think about all this money you guys are paying. Think about how this could be your last chance to have a kid. I would never want to put one of my patients in a position where they were afraid to ask me questions. Routinely, people email me and ask me things. I haven't, I share this on my Instagram, I share this on my YouTube channel. I encourage you guys to ask questions. I don't mind, trying to answer things that I know best. I'm not here to talk bad about other labs or other embryologists. I respect all of my colleagues, and I'm so grateful for my mentors because I've learned so much. And believe it or not, I've learned so much from going to other labs and doing per diem there. I'm learning different skills, I'm learning different theories. I love exposing myself to those things because when someone has a failed cycle, you need to try something different. Something's not working for them. IVF is not a cookie cutter kind of thing. Everybody needs something different sometimes, and maybe a change is all you need to make a blast and make a baby. So, you know, being at a lab that's flexible and is willing to share all this with you and help you get to that baby is, you know, the only kind of lab I ever want to work in, and hopefully the only kind of lab that you ever want to be a part of. So I hoped this helped a little bit. I had a lot of people asking me about it, and I kind of just wanted to, they were always sending me their transfer photos. Why does my embryo look like this? Guys, I understand that your embryos are not always going to look like this. You know, they're not going to be this beautiful. Sometimes you have small blasts that don't expand very well. There's a difference between an unexpanded blast that's still alive and an unexpanded blast that's dead. There's a clear difference, and shame on those labs that transfer dead embryos, because I know sometimes that happens, but being transparent with the patient is so much more important. I understand, hey, it's your last embryo, it doesn't look that great. I've seen ugly embryos that didn't expand. Make a baby. Again, it has so much to do with how much time ahead of time you thawed the embryo, how it was frozen, who froze that embryo, the type of media used, what kind of protein percentage are you using when you thaw. These things are so important, and just something that you and your lab should, you know, your lab knows what they're doing, and as long as you're at a creditable lab with people who know what they're doing, which you can check, that's all you really need to check on, and the rest is up to them. And I hope that this sheds a light on how much attention to detail all of us spend, because here at AFS, we take pre-freeze photos, we take pre-biopsy photos, we take post-biopsy and post-freeze photos, and I like to look back. You know, when me and Dr. Wong are going over an FET and we're trying to decide which embryo to thaw, I go back to those pre-freeze photos. Obviously, I want to see the photos of how the embryo looked after biopsy. Yes, it's going to be collapsed, but that embryo is going to re-expand most of the time and look just as nice as it did before. So I like referring to those embryos and looking at those photos, and that helps us make a decision. I really do think it makes like such a huge difference to be able to go back and look at those, because grading is just so subjective. You have juniors that work in your lab, you have mid-levels that work in your lab. It is important that everybody's on the same grading scale, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes people just put a lesser grade down, put a better grade down. When you can go back and look at the photos and be able to tell, it makes a difference. So a lot of people are probably going to be like, well, why don't I get pre-freeze photos? I've had situations before where I've given someone a pre-freeze photo and a post-transfer photo, and they tried to tell me it was in the same embryo. Please try to understand that they don't always look exactly the same as they did before the freeze. Sometimes embryos don't freeze well, they don't thaw well, they don't expand well. There's so many factors that go into it, which is why we don't give out those photos, because it kind of puts us in a spot where like patients don't really understand, they get upset, they get worried that it's, you know, something went wrong. You just have to trust your lab, and it's just so important to have it's just so important to have a good lab and to make sure that your embryos are in good hands. So do your research, ask those questions. Don't go to a clinic where they're leaving you in the dark, where they're not giving you embryology updates, where you don't know what's going on until day 6, and then you have no embryos left and you're left with nothing. I mean, for me, that would be heartbreaking, and I know it must be heartbreaking for you guys. So this is me just saying, be strong. All of the women that watch my channel, all my friends, all my patients that have become friends, it is so important for women to support women, and I love going on these forums, and I love going on these groups I have on Facebook, on Instagram. I love seeing women supporting each other, because women are strong in general, but women going through IVF, there's something special, and they're losing their minds trying to have this baby and to help us create this family for them. And it's just so important for us to empower each other, for us to be understanding and not call someone crazy or delusional or, you know, any other kind of negative term when you're talking about somebody who's been cycling and cycling and failing. It's hard. It's not easy, guys. Loss after IVF, that's something I want to talk about, something that I want to do another full episode on. These women that I see on a daily basis are just so strong, and I am just so grateful to know these people and to be a part of their lives and to be able to try and help them. You guys inspire me to be a better woman, to be a better mom, to be a better embryologist. I love everything about my job, and I love that I get to have these encounters with you guys where I could tell you, you know, just how it's gonna be. You know, I'm transparent. I don't think you get that everywhere, but I hope that this channel brings that kind of clarity to you. I just hope that it could bring you guys together. I mean, I know the IVF community is a tight-knit community and you guys are all so supportive of each other. My goal is to get outside this IVF community and have other people understand why knowledge is power, and it's just so important to be supportive and kind to each other and understanding. And if more people could do that, and then patients can be more relaxed and less anxiety, less stress, that creates such a better environment, not just for everybody around that person, but for that person themselves. I don't think people realize how much stress and anxiety and negative vibes have on your body and how much it affects pregnancy rates. You're constantly negative or worried or stressed out. That's, you know, it's going to be so much harder for you to conceive or to even have implantation happen. Lots of people try acupuncture, but you know what the best for this is? Having supportive people around you. And I just hope that you guys have a tribe, have people that you can reach out to. Please know that I'm here for you. I don't know you, I'm here for you, and I understand what you're going through, and you know, we're here to help, and I hope that's exactly what I'm doing. So, I hope you all subscribe. I'm sorry, I kind of got off the topic there. I hope you all subscribe and like and comment on my channel. Give me some more stuff to talk about. I love doing these videos, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.